Anxiety and ADHD, two words that often get tossed around, but do we really understand what they mean when they show up in our lives? If you've ever felt overwhelmed by constant worry, or like your mind is racing in a million directions at once, you're not alone. It's easy to feel like you're drowning in your own thoughts, trying to juggle everything at once, but nothing ever sticks. The truth is, these struggles aren't just in your head. They're real, and they're affecting more people than you think. But here's the kicker. Understanding them is the first step to regaining control and thriving. Perfectionism is a trap that many people, especially those with anxiety or ADHD, fall into without realizing it. We're often taught to aim for excellence in everything we do, but what happens when this desire for perfection turns into a constant pursuit? It becomes paralyzing. Instead of making progress, you find yourself frozen in fear, waiting for the perfect time or the perfect conditions. The reality is that perfection doesn't exist, yet we continue to chase it, thinking that once we reach it, we will feel worthy, successful, or accomplished. But this idea is nothing more than an illusion that keeps us stuck in a never-ending cycle of frustration and self-doubt. This pursuit of perfection is a psychological trap that makes us constantly second-guess ourselves. The constant pressure to get everything right often leads to procrastination. You find yourself endlessly tweaking, reworking, or delaying tasks because they're not good enough yet. This cycle makes it hard to ever finish anything, leaving you feeling like a failure even though you've done more than most. You wait for the perfect moment, but that moment never comes. You will never feel ready. The secret is to act anyway. Perfectionism also fuels anxiety. When you expect yourself to do everything perfectly, every little mistake feels like the end of the world. You're not just afraid of failing, you're terrified of being judged, criticized, or rejected because of your imperfections. This fear creates a constant state of stress, making it harder to take action, let alone make progress. Anxiety thrives in these high-pressure environments where you're continually worried about making mistakes. The truth is that mistakes are not only inevitable, they're necessary. They are the stepping stones to success. Yet perfectionism tricks us into believing that mistakes should be avoided at all costs. For those with ADHD, perfectionism can be even more suffocating. ADHD can make it difficult to focus and stay on task, which naturally leads to unfinished projects, missed deadlines, and disorganization. Instead of acknowledging that some tasks might take longer or need adjustments along the way, perfectionism adds an extra layer of pressure. It makes everything feel like it has to be perfect from the start, which is unrealistic. It leads to self-criticism and further disengagement, as the fear of not being able to achieve perfection in the first place becomes too overwhelming. Living in this state of perfectionism means living in a constant battle with yourself. You're constantly measuring your self-worth against an impossible standard. The more you chase perfection, the more you feel like you're falling short. Every time you fail to meet your own unrealistic expectations, your self-esteem takes a hit. The harsh truth is that perfection is an unattainable goal. The idea that you need to be flawless in order to be successful is simply a myth. If you wait for perfect conditions, you'll never get anything done. The trap of perfectionism also isolates you from others. When you are constantly trying to meet impossible standards, you become afraid to show your real self. You may hide your mistakes or pretend that you have it all together, even when you're struggling. This prevents you from connecting with others authentically and can create a sense of loneliness. Perfectionism keeps you stuck in your own head, making it difficult to see that others are also imperfect and struggling just like you. Perfectionism is the enemy of progress. Action is the key to breaking free from the cycle of perfectionism, especially when it comes to managing anxiety and ADHD. The key to progress isn't waiting for everything to be perfect before you begin. The reality is, perfection is an illusion, and waiting for the perfect moment only leads to paralysis. It's easy to get stuck in overthinking, constantly considering all the variables and possibilities until you feel overwhelmed. But this kind of thinking won't get you anywhere. Taking action, no matter how small, is the bridge that leads to meaningful change. You don't need to feel ready to take the first step, just take it. When you're constantly caught in the trap of perfectionism, you start to believe that you have to get everything right before moving forward. This belief is paralyzing. You end up putting things off, second guessing yourself, and ultimately doing nothing. But the truth is, action is the antidote to fear. It's action that gives you clarity, not perfection. The more you act, the more momentum you build. It doesn't matter how messy or imperfect the first step is, the fact that you're doing something is what counts. The key is getting started, even if you don't have everything figured out yet. The action you take creates the results that waiting for perfection never will. Action also has the power to break the loop of anxiety and worry. When you're anxious, it's easy to get stuck in your thoughts, spiraling over all the things that could go wrong. You overthink, question your every decision, and imagine worst-case scenarios. But as soon as you take action, you stop the cycle of anxiety in its tracks. The act of doing stops the chatter in your mind. Even if the action you take is small, it shifts your energy from fear to empowerment. You stop focusing on all the ways you might fail and start focusing on moving forward. It's that shift that makes all the difference. For those with ADHD, taking action is often the key to overcoming the feeling of being scattered and distracted. ADHD can cause your mind to jump from task to task, leaving a trail of unfinished projects. The constant switching of focus can make you feel like you're never getting anything done. However, when you begin taking small, intentional actions, no matter how insignificant they may seem, you start creating a sense of order in the chaos. Action creates clarity. The more you do, the more you understand what needs to be done next. Each step builds on the previous one, and you find yourself gaining focus and productivity. Another powerful reason why action is so important is that it builds confidence. The more you act, the more you prove to yourself that you are capable. Every time you take a step, even if it's small or imperfect, you reinforce the idea that you can handle challenges. Confidence doesn't come from waiting, it comes from doing. When you're struggling with anxiety or ADHD, taking action is a form of self-empowerment. It's a reminder that, despite the obstacles you face, you have the ability to take charge of your life and move forward. Lastly, action transforms your mindset. It shifts your focus from what could go wrong to what you're actually doing in the present moment. Instead of being paralyzed by fear or indecision, action encourages you to live in the now and trust that each step is leading you somewhere important. The act of doing changes your mindset. It pulls you out of your head and into your power. It teaches you that even the smallest effort counts, and that no action is too small to make an impact on your growth and well-being. Fear is one of the most powerful forces that can hold us back from reaching our full potential. It has a way of creeping into our thoughts, making us second, guess ourselves, and paralyze us with self-doubt. When fear takes over, it convinces us that the worst-case scenario is the most likely, making it hard to take the first step toward anything new. This kind of fear is deceptive, making us feel like we are incapable or unworthy, even when we have the skills or resources to succeed. Fear is a liar because it distorts the truth and keeps us from seeing the opportunities right in front of us. The danger of fear is that it feeds on uncertainty. When you don't know what the outcome will be, Fear makes you believe the worst is inevitable. It creates a loop of negative thoughts that keeps you stuck in a cycle of inaction. The more you hesitate, the more fear takes root. It's easy to become trapped in the belief that you need to be 100% sure before taking action. But the truth is, waiting for certainty often keeps you from doing anything at all. You will never feel ready. The key is learning to act despite not having all the answers. Fear can also manifest as a fear of failure, which is particularly powerful when you're dealing with anxiety or ADHD. You may fear that failing will lead to judgment, embarrassment, or rejection. But in reality, failure is a natural part of growth. It's not a reflection of your worth, but a necessary step toward learning and improvement. The only way to get what you want is to take action, even if you're not guaranteed success. Embracing failure as part of the process allows you to take more risks and challenge yourself without the weight of perfectionism. For those with ADHD, fear often takes the form of overwhelm. The fear of being unable to focus or of letting things slip through the cracks can stop you from even starting. But this fear of failure or being judged creates more chaos and distraction. The truth is, by taking small actions and breaking tasks down, you can quiet the overwhelming fear. You don't need to be fearless to move forward, you just need to move. Once you take the first step, it becomes easier to keep going and prove to yourself that you are capable, no matter what your mind tries to convince you of. Fear also tends to block creativity and innovation. When you're constantly worried about what might go wrong, it becomes nearly impossible to think outside the box. This is particularly frustrating when trying to break free from the chains of perfectionism. Fear makes us feel like we need to get everything right before we begin, but this only stifles our creativity. Perfectionism is the enemy of progress. It prevents us from taking action in the first place, and without action, we can't grow or evolve. Taking imperfect steps forward often leads to the breakthroughs we need. The more we allow fear to control us, the more we reinforce the idea that we can't handle challenges. This belief, if left unchecked, can affect not only our work but also our personal lives. We become convinced that we're not capable of succeeding, even when all the evidence suggests otherwise. Fear is a habit, not a truth. It's a mental pattern that we can choose to break by taking action. The moment you stop letting fear dictate your decisions is the moment you begin to reclaim your power. ADHD and perfectionism are two forces that, when combined, can create a perfect storm of frustration and self-doubt. People with ADHD often struggle with staying focused, maintaining organization, and completing tasks, and perfectionism only amplifies these challenges. The constant desire to do everything perfectly can be paralyzing, especially when ADHD makes it difficult to follow through on tasks. This combination creates an internal battle where the person feels stuck between trying to meet unrealistic standards and being overwhelmed by the sheer amount of work ahead. You don't need to be perfect to take action. For someone with ADHD, perfectionism often leads to procrastination. The pressure to make everything perfect can feel so overwhelming that instead of starting, the person simply avoids the task altogether. With ADHD, it's easy to get distracted and lose track of time, but perfectionism adds another layer of stress, creating the belief that everything has to be done flawlessly from the start. This makes it nearly impossible to begin any project, as the fear of not meeting high expectations outweighs the ability to make progress. Procrastination is the result of fear. Fear is what stops us from starting. Another way perfectionism negatively impacts those with ADHD is through the tendency to jump between tasks. ADHD often causes people to struggle with focus, causing them to hop from one project to another without ever finishing anything. The desire for perfection makes this worse because perfectionists feel that if they can't give 100% of their attention to each task, they will fail. This results in unfinished projects, a growing sense of inadequacy, and the false belief that they are incapable of completing anything. When you take action, you take control. In addition, the rigid standards of perfectionism create a mindset where mistakes are seen as something to avoid at all costs. But for people with ADHD, mistakes are an inevitable part of the process. When the brain is constantly shifting focus or losing track of time, it's impossible to avoid mistakes. Perfectionism only magnifies this, creating guilt and self-criticism whenever something goes wrong. Mistakes are not failures, they are simply lessons in disguise. The pressure to get everything right also leads to burnout, particularly for those with ADHD. Juggling multiple responsibilities and trying to meet high expectations is exhausting. People with ADHD often find themselves overwhelmed by the amount of effort it takes just to stay on track, let alone achieve perfection. This leads to physical and mental exhaustion, further exacerbating the symptoms of ADHD and leading to a cycle of frustration and defeat. You can't control everything, but you can control how you react. Finally, the fear of imperfection becomes a barrier to growth. For someone with ADHD, trying to do everything perfectly can feel like a never-ending race against time. The internal dialogue constantly reinforces that nothing is ever good enough, even when progress has been made. This fear of not being perfect prevents the individual from moving forward and reaching their potential. The only way to break through fear is to take action, even when you're not sure what the outcome will be. Anxiety feeds off perfectionism like fire feeds off fuel. When you're constantly striving for perfection, you're never satisfied with what you've done. Every small mistake becomes a source of stress, and the fear of making more mistakes paralyzes you. This constant pressure to get everything just right creates a breeding ground for anxiety. Instead of focusing on progress, perfectionism forces you to obsess over details, which makes it hard to enjoy any task or accomplishment. Perfectionism is the enemy of progress. You are so focused on getting it flawless that you miss out on the growth that comes from making mistakes. For those who struggle with anxiety, the need for perfection often becomes a way of trying to control their environment. Anxiety thrives in uncertainty, and perfectionism creates the illusion that by making everything perfect, you can somehow reduce that uncertainty. However, the reality is that nothing is ever perfect, and trying to force perfection only leads to more stress. The fear of failure becomes overwhelming, making even the simplest decisions feel like monumental challenges. You will never feel ready, and that's okay. The more you wait for everything to be just right, the more anxiety builds up, paralyzing you further. Perfectionism also makes it impossible to take action without feeling overwhelmed. The belief that every task must be done perfectly before moving on prevents you from starting anything in the first place. This can lead to a vicious cycle of procrastination, where the longer you put things off, the more anxious you become about not meeting your own impossibly high standards. The fear of not being perfect can make even the smallest task feel monumental, creating an anxiety-filled spiral that's difficult to escape. The best way to overcome anxiety is to act anyway. As perfectionism and anxiety build on each other, you become hyper-focused on the end result. Every moment of the process is overshadowed by the fear of failure, and you begin to tie your worth to the outcome. This puts an incredible amount of pressure on you to perform at your best all the time, which is simply unrealistic. The constant need to be perfect keeps you in a state of anxiety, as you feel like anything less than perfection is unacceptable. Perfectionism keeps you stuck. Action helps you move forward. The mental strain of perfectionism also leads to self-criticism. The more you try to achieve perfection, the harder you are on yourself when things go wrong. Every mistake becomes a personal failure, and anxiety amplifies this self-judgment. You begin to feel inadequate, as though you're not capable of meeting the high expectations you've set for yourself. The constant self-criticism and fear of not measuring up can erode your self-confidence over time. Be kind to yourself. You're doing better than you think. Furthermore, perfectionism can isolate you from others, making it difficult to share your thoughts or ask for help. The fear of being judged for not being perfect keeps you from being authentic and vulnerable with those around you. You may hide your mistakes, pretending that everything is fine, which only adds to the anxiety. By not being open about your struggles, you prevent yourself from receiving the support and encouragement you need. The courage to be imperfect is the first step toward freedom. Perfectionism creates walls between you and others, making it harder to connect and ultimately worsening the anxiety that holds you back. Letting go of perfection opens up the possibility for freedom in a way that's often unimaginable to those who are caught in the cycle of striving for flawless outcomes. When you're constantly chasing perfection, you're in a constant state of control, trying to manipulate every situation to ensure it's exactly as you envision it. This relentless pursuit drains your energy, stifles creativity, and keeps you stuck in a loop of anxiety and self-criticism. Perfectionism is the killer of progress. The more you let go of the need to be perfect, the more space you create for growth, learning, and self-compassion. By letting go of perfection, you release yourself from the suffocating pressure to meet unrealistic standards. Perfectionism often causes you to measure your success by how well you meet external expectations, leaving no room for imperfection or personal growth. When you embrace imperfection, you free yourself from the need for validation from others and give yourself permission to make mistakes. The moment you stop looking for perfection is the moment you start to see how much you've already accomplished. It's only when you let go of the illusion of perfection that you can appreciate the beauty of progress, however messy or imperfect it may seem. Embracing imperfection also allows you to be kinder to yourself. When you're trapped in perfectionism, you become your own harshest critic, always pointing out your flaws and feeling like you're never enough. Letting go of this need to be perfect means showing yourself the same compassion you would show to a friend who's struggling. You're doing better than you think. Stop being so hard on yourself. By freeing yourself from perfectionism, you create a new relationship with yourself, one that is based on understanding and self-acceptance rather than self-judgment. Letting go of perfection also paves the way for creativity and innovation. Perfectionism stifles creativity because it's rooted in fear of failure. When everything has to be flawless, there's no room for experimentation or exploration. You become afraid of trying new things because the fear of making mistakes is so overwhelming. But when you let go of the need to be perfect, you free yourself to try new ideas, make mistakes, and learn from them. The key to creativity is letting go of fear. You can't create anything new if you're terrified of getting it wrong. In the absence of perfectionism, you give yourself the freedom to innovate and think outside the box. Additionally, when you let go of perfectionism, you stop comparing yourself to others. Perfectionism often thrives on comparison, making you feel like you're falling short because someone else seems to have it all together. But when you release the need to be perfect, you begin to focus more on your own path and your own journey. Comparison is the thief of joy. Letting go of perfection means freeing yourself from the exhausting habit of measuring your worth against others, and instead embracing your own progress, no matter how small. Lastly, embracing imperfection allows you to take risks and push past your comfort zone. Perfectionism keeps you playing it safe, afraid to try anything new or step into the unknown because the outcome might not be perfect. However, when you let go of the need to be perfect, you take more risks and find out just how much you're capable of. The only way to grow is to step out of your comfort zone, and growth is always messy. By releasing the need for perfection, you allow yourself the freedom to take chances and experience life without the constant fear of making mistakes. Anxiety and ADHD may feel like they're holding you back, but they don't define who you are or what you're capable of. The real truth: you can take control of how they show up in your life by getting to know them better, breaking the patterns that keep you stuck, and learning how to use your unique brain to your advantage. You don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to have it all figured out right now. Just take one step today, whether it's being kinder to yourself or taking small, focused action, and you'll see just how powerful that can be. You've got everything you need to face these challenges and rise above them. The journey starts now.